Well, welcome to the fifth installment of The Smartest People in the Room. I am thrilled to be hosting this one from one of Nashville's most famous rooms, the legendary Bluebird Cafe. You may recognize this iconic backdrop from the television show, or maybe you've been here live and in person, and that's exactly where I am sitting today. Before we get started, let me take care of some business. First, I want to thank all of our sponsors, for without their support, we could not do what we do. First Horizon Bank, Bufkin Baker, which is the search firm that I work for. Many of you out there may know that I am a headhunter in the music industry. Four Roses Bourbon, the Fairlane Hotel, Core Power Yoga, the Tennessee Entertainment Commission, Lightning 100, Tennessee Brew Works, Moo TV, Jive Printing, Project Music, and also Organics. Again, I want to thank all those companies for supporting what we do at Who Knew, and with this series called The Smartest People in the Room. Without their support, we couldn't do it. Let me talk a little bit about this room where I'm broadcasting today. The Bluebird, gosh, where do you begin? As the old saying goes, it all starts with a song. And today I have the pleasure of celebrating three icons of songwriting. This legendary establishment opened its doors in June of 1982. On July 1, 1984, a music industry first happened right here, and that is the first Writers' Night, which for the uninitiated is an evening in which up-and-coming songwriters have the opportunity to play some of their original material with a special guest who's had some songwriting success. And the very first one of those was here, and Don Schlitz was the guest that night. You may know that name. If you don't, one of the legendary hits that he wrote was Kenny Rogers' career-defining hit, The Gambler. On March 29th, 1985, another industry first took place inside these hallowed halls, and that is the very first In the Round happened. And in an In the Round format, which means the writers sit in the center of the Bluebird playing, taking turns and telling stories. It also seems so normal today, but it was truly revolutionary back then, and it's now so widely accepted globally. Over the past 30 years, the parade of stars who performed on this tiny yet huge stage reads like a who's who of songwriting and performing royalty. Names like Garth Brooks, Pam Tillis, Patti Loveless, Faith Hill, and countless others have performed here. In fact, Scott Borchetta discovered a 14-year-old Taylor Swift here, and we all know how her career progressed from that moment forward. Which brings me to today's guests, both of whom are legendary for their involvement with the craft of songwriting. Bart Herbison, who is conducting our interview today. Songwriters have no better friend than Bart Herbison. Bart is the executive director of the Nashville Songwriters Association International, NSAI. This is the world's largest not-for-profit songwriters trade organization and advocacy group dedicated to the songwriting profession. Among the many huge accomplishments under Bart's leadership, three of these stand out. First, the adoption of the Music Modernization Act in 2018, the most important copyright law reform for songwriters in decades. Second, the creation of the Mechanical Licensing Collective. And third, Bart led the NSAI involvement with the 2016 Copyright Royalty Board trial that led to a historic 44% mechanical royalty increase for American songwriters. As I said, we have no better friend of songwriters than Bart Herbison. Now, let me shine a light on our special guest today, Mr. Brett James, or Dr. Brett James as it almost was. Brett James has had more than 500 of his songs recorded by some of the biggest names in the industry. His songs have appeared on albums with combined sales of over 110 million copies. He's had numerous hit singles, including 25 number ones. Think about that, 25 times this guy's song has appeared at the top of the charts. And he won a Grammy in 2006 for Jesus Take the Wheel. He was named ASCAP's Country Songwriter of the Year in 2006 and 2010, and Music Row Magazine's Songwriter of the Year in 2015. He's received more than 40 ASCAP Hit Song Awards for country, pop, Latin, and Christian genres. As a producer, his credits include Taylor Swift, Jessica Simpson, Danielle Bradbury, and Kip Moore. Brett is currently in his 15th year of service on the board of directors of the Country Music Association. He has served as a national trustee of the Recording Academy, and he also serves on the board of the NSAI. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome today's guests on The Smartest People in the Room, Bart Herbison and Brett James.
Wow, Tom, I'm glad I hit record right before you started all that. Thank you. So you asked me to do this, and who did you want to interview? And I said, Brett. You said, but think about it. I said, Brett, and I'm so glad Brett was available. You know, once upon a time, I was in a room with Stephen Hawking, Albert Einstein, and Brett. Brett got up to go get a soda, and he came back, and Hawking and Einstein were arguing over when he returned who the second smartest person in the room would be. So I do think it's apropos because, look, he alluded to it, Brett, but people know you for a lot of things, but I know you also for your intellect. So let's start with that story. You were the son of a doctor, and that was the path you were headed down once upon a time. Pick up that story there.
It is. Well, hello, everybody. Thank you for having me today. Thank you, Tom, and Bart for inviting me today. I understand why, though I immediately understood why we're doing The Smartest People in the Room, for me, at least during COVID, because I looked around and I'm the only person in the room. So it kind of all adds up. But yes, to answer your question, Bart, I did start out to be a doctor. Where I grew up in Oklahoma, you know, being a musician is not really on your list of things they give you in high school that you can go do. And so I went to college, and it was during my first year of medical school that I went to, I had one of those kind of moments. I went to a Steve Wariner concert in Oklahoma City as a freshman year medical student. I was a big country music fan, but I, you know, just never thought, and I'd always sung, I'd always played, but I never thought about doing it for a living. But I went to a Steve Wariner concert one night in Oklahoma City, and Steve's a good friend of mine now. And I think every songwriter, every artist, everybody that ends up in the arts at some point has that moment where they see someone on stage or someone in a movie, and they look and they think, you know, I think I can do that. And I remember seeing Steve Wariner that night, knowing that I could never play guitar like he plays, because he's amazing. But as far as the writing and the singing were concerned, I thought, you know, I think I can do that. And that was kind of my moment to decide that not, you know, and it took me a while to shift gears out of medical school, but I went home that night and started writing songs and sort of taking it seriously and just seeing where that led me. And it's sort of led me here.
Well, let's continue that story because I find it fascinating. So you quit medical school.
I did. Yeah.
Or maybe more fair to say, I think you actually had a conversation with the head guy and you went on hiatus. We'll use an entertainment. Pick the
That's
story.
The way, yeah. My story is long and arduous, but
no,
yeah.
I want to hear it. It's fascinating to me. I love this story.
What happened was I wrote some songs my freshman year in med school. I worked at camp that summer and took $1,000 I made from working at camp and spent it recording 5 of the 10 first songs I'd ever written in Oklahoma City at whatever studio was there at the time. You know, you recorded on a little cassette tape. And I was incredibly well connected in the music business. I had one friend who was an intern in college radio promotion in Ann Arbor, Michigan. That was my connection to the music business. Her name is Deb Markland, and we're still good friends today. And if any of you guys work in Nashville, you probably know Deb because she's married to Steve Markland, an amazing publisher, but Deb also worked at Arista Records, and she started 30 Tigers many, many years ago. She hasn't been in the business for a while now, but Deb was my best friend at Baylor University, where we both went to school in Texas. So she was, and at that time, she was an intern. She was a 22-year-old intern, just learning the business like everyone else. And I sent her my little cassette tape that I made in Oklahoma City. Well, Deb passed it along to her boss, who had been a big shot in the music business, a lady named Reen Nally. Some of you guys probably know Reen. She lives in Nashville as well now. And at that point, Reen was just doing kind of college radio, but Reen had this amazing career in New York until she got tired of it. But she started the Atco record label and worked for Ahmet Ertegun and had done a lot of stuff in the music business. So this is 1992, and Reen hears my songs, and you know, this is the era where country music was just exploding. You know, Garth was exploding, and you know, Randy Travis and Clint Black, and you know, Nashville was just at the height of just booming. And so Reen heard my little 5-song cassette, and she called me. She wanted to be my manager. She called me. She said, well, I love this stuff. I'd love to manage you. You know, when can I get you to Nashville? And I said, well, I'm in medical school, but I have spring break coming up. So she said, great, I'll meet you in Nashville. So I jumped in my Datsun and drove to Nashville for the first time on my spring break of my sophomore year, met Reen here, and she took me around to some record labels. And, you know, as they do, they pat you on the head and say, thanks for coming in, and send you on your way. And a couple did that. And then we kind of lucked into a meeting with Tim Dubois. And Tim at the time was the head of Arista Records, who in those days was they were the kings. They were just rocking. They exploded with, you know, Alan Jackson and Brooks and Dunn and some others. And so I got lucked into this meeting with Tim Dubois, and he heard my stuff. And he looked at me across his desk, and he always called everyone Mister. He said, Mister, hey, Mister. He said, I've only told one other person this, and that was Ronnie Dunn. But if you move to Nashville, I'll give you a record deal. And this was my 3rd day in Nashville. And I was like, of course I was flattered, you know, but I also was kind of deep into this whole med school thing. That's what I've been doing for 6 years, studying to do that. And so I said, well, thank you, and I'll think about it. And he gave me his home phone number. Tim's, you know, I texted with Tim 2 days ago. That was 28 years ago. We're still hanging out. You know, he's still one of my favorite people. Wrote with his son, Chris, yesterday, as a matter of fact. But so I thought about it and decided I could take a year off med school, and, you know, in a year, I'd know whether I was going to make it or not. And that's, of course, incredibly naive to think that. But I moved to I told med school I was taking a year off, moved here the day after I took my board exams. And I did not call Tim for 9 months after I moved here. I just knew instinctively I wasn't ready. So I did what every wannabe country artist does. I started playing all the open mic nights I could, and playing every party I could get, you know, show up for. And I waited tables at Midtown Cafe on 19th Avenue. And, you know, after a few months, I was lucky enough to get my own publishing deal and make some music that I was proud of. And so it was about a year to the day after Tim told me he'd give me a deal if I moved to town, before I called him again. And, you know, I said, I don't even know if you remember who I am, but a year ago you said if I moved to Nashville, you'd at least consider giving me a record deal. He said, I remember you. And so I came in, and the next thing I know, I was showcasing for Arista Records at the week the Wild Horse Saloon opened in downtown Nashville, and he gave me a record deal that night, and that was in the summer of '93. And then I proceeded to fail miserably for the next 7 years. So that's kind of the way it all started.
Didn't you go back to medical school for 5 minutes?
I did. It was more than 5 minutes. It was a whole nother year. You know, the story goes, I had this big record deal. Everybody thinks I'm going to be Garth Brooks, and then it doesn't work. And as record deal, so I was signed to Arista from like 93 to maybe 97 or 8. Your record fails, and it's time to regroup. Let's use a new producer. We'll change it all up. And if it's not working at some point, they kind of have to let you go.
And Brett, not to interrupt, but if I remember, there may have been a cowboy hat on that album cover, the way I remember it.
There was some Star-Spangled jeans. There was a cowboy hat. This was the 90s, baby, and I loved it. You know, I still love 90s country music. You know, and you know, I went to college, like I said, I went to college in Texas, and I learned all about that stuff when I was in college, because even though it was funny growing up in Oklahoma, I lived in a town in western Oklahoma with 3,000 people for all of middle school, and I don't even remember hearing a country song. My friends were all listening to pop and rock and whatever was on the radio. But when I moved to Texas, I learned how to wear ropers, learned how to wear Wranglers, and learned all about the scene. And you're right, it was a lot of starch in that shirt.
Didn't you have to eat a little humble pie going back, though? I think you had to have a conversation with the big man there, the dean.
There was a lot of humble pie, period. Because when you fail, you know, it's hard. You know, everybody treats you, when you first come to Nashville, and you got some big shot telling everybody you're the next big thing, you kind of get treated like that. And so I got treated like that. And I had, you know, 6-figure publishing deals when I was 24 years old, you know, stuff like that. And that just doesn't exist anymore. And then all of a sudden it goes away, and you lose your record deal. And that's what happened to me. I lost my record deal, lost my publishing deal, got cut by 2/3. And I had 2 small kids. And so I kind of reached a point in life where it was, you know, not about my dream anymore. It was about feeding my kids. And that's all that really mattered to me at that point. And, you know, I had a moment in a Target one day where I kind of just looked at a pair of tennis shoes in Target, and they were about $12. And I remember, I'd love to buy that for my 1-year-old, but I can't afford it. And I'm not going to live like this, you know? But all I'd ever done was go to school and try to write songs. And so I snail mailed the dean of the medical school a letter and said, I know you're only supposed to be out for a year. I've been out for 7, but is there any chance I can get back in? And I had good grades. And so she said, you can come back, but you got to repeat your sophomore year. So I went back in 1999 to repeat my sophomore year, thinking I was kind of leaving Nashville behind.
But something incredible. I mean, I've heard a lot of incredible things. Something incredible happens next.
Well, for me,
based on the seeds you'd planted.
Yeah, you know, I had just signed a new, much cheaper publishing deal with a guy named Mark Bright, who produces all Carrie Underwood. A lot of you guys know Mark. And you know, and I was his only writer. It was a brand new company, and he signed me. About a month later, I had this sort of epiphany, like I need to feed my kids. And so I take him to breakfast at the Pancake Pantry about a month later, and I say, you know, I know I'm your only writer, and it's a brand new company, but I got kids to feed, and I'm worried about that. And so I'm going to go back to medical school in Oklahoma. And Mark, being incredibly gracious and cool about the whole thing and having kids himself, he said, man, I totally get it. You know, it's a tough business. You should do that. But he said, you got a contract for a year. You might as well write songs and see what happens in your free time. So I go back to school, and a buddy of mine named Troy Burgess, who's now a famous songwriter. At that time, nobody knew who he was. He was 23 years old, I think. He and I started writing together in Nashville, and we kind of had found a cool little vibe. We hadn't had any songs recorded yet, but we knew we were onto something. So I had the same conversation with Troy. I said, Troy, I know things are happening, things are good, but I got to go. I'm going to go to med school in Oklahoma. And Troy didn't bat an eye. He goes, no worries, man. I'll just come out there. So he would fly out to Oklahoma about once a month and spend a week with me at my parents' house. And, you know, when I get home from pathology or whatever it was, Troy and I would write songs deep into the night. And a funny thing happened, you know, having had 2 cuts into my career before that year, in that 9 months, he and I got 33 songs recorded, and we had 5 top 10.
Wait a minute. How many?
That year that 9 months, we had 33 songs recorded, and had 5 top 10 singles that year.
Wow. And
Troy was BMI Songwriter of the Year that year. And I would have been with him, but my songs were split between BMI and ASCAP that particular year. But it was a pretty cool time, all of a sudden, to, you know, go from nothing happening and to really giving up the music business to being in, I remember just vividly being in the medical school library and you know, showing up and you know, getting a phone call on my little flip cell phone from Kelly King, my song plugger. And, you know, she'd be like, Brett, Tim McGraw just cut Telluride, or Martina McBride just cut Blessed, or Faith Hill just cut Love is a Sweet Thing. And, you know, for me, I was, you know, I'd be standing in a library, you know, and like looking around like, there's nobody to tell, you know. I couldn't share the news with anybody. So I just do a little dance myself there and wherever I was and celebrate on my own. But that's how it all started. I finished that year in med school and, you know, just moved back into town and picked up right where I left off.
Well, now it's 500. Let me say it again. 500 cuts later. Seriously? I mean, even now, when you look at that, Brett, that's wow.
It's been a fun 20 years. I will say that. You know, it's been amazing, and to kind of, you know, just it's super humbling because, you know, I know there's millions more talented songwriters than I am, but you find your niche, you find what you're doing, you kind of learn the craft a little better, and then you get put in, and that leads you to opportunities where you're getting to write with your heroes, you know, and be in rooms with people you never thought you'd get in rooms with, and it's a really fun job at that level.
Well, you know, a lot of writers, and I say this complimentary because it's hard to ever get a single hit song or write anything that anybody cares about. They get pretty good at writing 1 or 2 kinds of songs. You're one of the most ambidextrous writers I've ever seen. You've written in every genre, every era, lyrically, musically. You are simply, Brad, and one of the reasons I wanted to do this interview, one of the best songwriters in any language in any era. And I think our culture and the planet is better off for it. So let's jump into a couple of the songs themselves. I'd get to do a very fun thing, the funnest part of my job, in our local Gannett paper every week called The Story Behind the Song. It's the story behind a song. I would argue, and I think I said it in the interview, that one of your bigger hits, Jesus Take the Wheel, is one of the 10 greatest songs, also not ever written just in country music, but in any language. But let's do a little mini version of that story behind the song. You weren't so sure that day, right?
No, Jesus Take the Wheel was it was a funny one, and it's an example for those who are not in or don't know anything about the business of songwriting. It's sort of an example of a very typical songwriting day. It was just a day at the office. Songwriters, we're hard workers. We show up at the crack of 11 to work, and this day was no different than that. I showed up at the crack of 11 with and we typically collaborate. I don't when I'm writing my own projects now. I like to write those by myself. But when we're writing for other artists, we almost always collaborate. And I always say, because it's more fun to sit around in your underwear with other people than it is to sit around in your underwear by yourself. And there's some truth to that. It's just more fun to be with people and to have the fellowship. And, if I don't have an idea today, maybe someone else does. So we collaborate. And this particular day, I was with the legendary now, Hillary Lindsey. She wasn't a legend then, but she is now one of the greatest ever. And Gordy Sampson, who's also just a super amazing songwriter. And we were at Hillary's little house on Westbrook Street over in the Richland area. And, as songwriters do, we show up and we BS and we talk about life and what's going on with our kids. That's the first hour. But then it's time to sit down and to actually, try to have an original thought, try to come up with something that maybe no one said quite that way before. So that's always the challenge. And we all keep lists of songs in our phone or written down in our notebooks. And so we sat down, and I remember we're kind of going through, concepts or ideas for songs. And Gordy throws out he said, I got this idea for a song called When Jesus Takes the Wheel. And I sort of just laughed. I thought, well, I don't know what you do with that. I'd never heard that phrase. I'm not sure anyone had at that point. And I thought, so what, we got Jesus in a Datsun? Is he in a truck? What does Jesus drive? Is he in a robe, driving down the road?
Is it a country song? Is it a Christian song? I mean,
What is it, right? Sure. And so we kind of talked through it a little bit, and sort of almost chuckled and laughed it off and went through 4 or 5 different ideas. And we must have gotten stuck on those because thankfully we came back to Jesus Take the Wheel. And we wrote that little song about this little girl driving to Cincinnati. So yeah, it ended up being which,
by the way, is maybe my favorite rhyme in the history of country music.
Cincinnati.
We're going to close this out. I'm going to ask you to play it later on. We got a question from our viewer here, Melinda Ebert. And I think it probably relates to the first part of your story between you trying 7-year, 8, going home, etc. How did you stay inspired to keep moving forward, Brett?
I think that's the challenge in life, isn't it? I mean, especially when you fail a little bit, you keep moving forward and keep trying. And, what I will say, what reminds me of what that reminds me of is that time when I did kind of give up, when I went, I was like, okay, I'm going to go do something else for a living. Creatively, that was very freeing. I think that's a big part of the reason why I started having success, because I think I'd been in Nashville. You get surrounded, you get kind of this music row funk on you a little bit. It's like, okay, we got to do this. This is what country music is doing right now.
It's a hamster wheel.
Yeah. And if I can't fit into that box, or what I'm doing is not what's happening right now, then I'm stuck creatively. And if I can't do that, then I've got to do something else. And the reality is we all need to be freeing ourselves up to bring our own creativity into that and make it better, make it bigger, make it wider. And so for me, when I left town and all of a sudden I was in Oklahoma City at my parents' house, just about as far away from the music business as you can be. And I didn't have it. I released this pressure because I was like, okay, I'm in school. I have a plan. If I continue with this plan, I'll be a doctor. Someday my kids will be able to go to school and be fed. That weight is off my shoulders. And so forgive my language, but a big part of me was just like, fuck it. I'm going to write what I like. I'm going to write what I love from my heart, what I think is cool. And Troy was all about that too. So Troy Burgess and I just started writing the stuff we thought was cool. And, you know, it turns out that's what worked for us. But it was
everybody else thought it was too.
Yeah, that's what it was, very freeing creatively. And I think a lot of times when you are stuck and you need to be driven, maybe you just need to kind of change the situation enough to see it from a different point of view.
Well, writers have a routine. It's like muscle memory for athletes, you know, and it's Christmas time one year and you're probably not writing and everybody's around the house and you've got this Pavlovian sort of urge to go do what you do. And the phone rings and it leads to some history. 2 number ones on the same day. Take us back.
Well, that was a fun day. That was a fun day.
Well, take us back to the phone call. And that.
Well, yeah, you know, I guess every song has a story, and this particular story started about 4:30 in the afternoon on Christmas Eve many years ago. I don't know what year this was. I should know. But I got this phone call about 4:30 in the afternoon, and I don't know why I picked up. It was blocked. It's always blocked when, you know, stars call. It's always blocked. But I picked up, and this buddy on the other end of the line, he talks like this. He said, hey man, what are you doing day after tomorrow? And now it was 4:30 in the afternoon on Christmas Eve, and I had 4 kids under the age of 12 at the time. So of course I said, well, nothing, man. What you got in mind, you know? And turned out what he had in mind was more fun than what I had planned. He said, why don't we go down to the islands and write some songs? And because those 4 children know what pays for Christmas presents around my house, I found myself 48 hours later in the islands. And when you get off the plane in the islands and you kind of smell that warm breeze and feel that salt air, this particular buddy and I are known to go just a little bit crazy. And this night was no different. But I woke up at his house the next day. I guess it must have been December 27th or whatever year that was. And I was actually, this guitar I'm holding right now was the one I grabbed and went out on his back deck and probably waited 3 hours for him to finally wake up, I guess. And the door to his room kind of creaked open, and Kenny Chesney stuck his head out through the door and he looked at me and said, Brett, we went out last night. And I said, yeah, we did. And maybe that's the song we should write today. And so I started strumming a little groove and playing.
Let's hear a little bit of it. Come on. Just right now. Sure. A little bit of it, please.
Well, so I started strumming this little groove and I go, ba, 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 da, da, da. And Kenny went, ba, 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 da, da, da. We just started talking and laughing about the night before. And a couple hours later, we had this song. We went out last night, like we swore that we wouldn't do. We drank too much beer last night, a lot more than we wanted to. There were girls from Argentina and Arkansas, Maine, Alabama, and Panama, all mixed together and having a ball. Oh, we went out last night. One thing started leading to another. Out last night, hitting on everybody and their mother. There were 2 karaoke girls drunk on a dare, singing I Got You, Babe by Sonny and Cher. Man, life was good everywhere. We went out last night. So that was the song we came up with that day, and that ended up being a great one. Big hit for Kenny.
But you weren't done yet. Not on that trip.
We were not done yet. That day was just a fun day. You know, we ended up we're both rum drinkers, and we ended up drinking copious amounts of rum and having some lunch, and we sat on his same deck by that pool, and we wrote another song that afternoon called Reality, and Reality ended up being a #1 song as well. So wherever Kenny is, probably flying over some fancy place in his fancy jet right now. I have to thank him because he's been awfully good to me through the years, and that was no exception. We had a blast that day.
And the next Christmas, the presents were better.
That's right. Paid for a few Christmas presents for the kids.
Well, I don't know who started it, but we call you the most interesting man in the world. When those commercials came out, we'd all watch them.
James Slater, Bart. You know that.
Did Slater start it? Well, it's apropos. And we'd see the commercials and we'd go, well, hell, that's Brett James. And you are. So I just want to touch on a few words because you are very multifaceted in and out of the music industry. And just give us, we'll almost make this like a psychological test. I'll say a word and you give us some thoughts. Okay. Producer. You're also a producer.
Love to produce. Can't do it the modern way. You know, I love to produce bands, like old school production. I love to do that. But now when you say producer in Nashville, that meaning has changed. Now that means a guy with a computer in a room. And that's a different kind of producer than I am. I still love to produce, but now when you call a guy a producer, you really think of a multi-instrumentalist or somebody who just knows how to work a computer. And that makes me sad a little bit if you really want to.
Well, I mean, I get it. And look, I think the greatest contributions in global music history are producers. I mean, are the Beatles without George Martin?
Sure.
A producer can mean different things in the industry. It means a great engineer. It means great sort of musical person. It means somebody just with a sense of direction of where the song should go. What was your strength as a producer, Brett?
You know, the ability to speak the musical language with the musicians was what and I'm a big picture guy. I can do a pretty good job of pointing the ship in the right direction. I can't go down and fix the engine, you know, and I can't raise the sails just right, but I'm pretty good at helping point the ship in the right direction and seeing where things need to be on a global level. That's kind of my strength as a producer. Okay. So now anymore, I just don't call myself a producer because people really think that you're going to sit down with your computer and create something that's magic. And man, have I tried to do that, and that's not my skill set.
That's another, Tom, by the way, whole topic for a different day on this, love and hate. So I'm going to use the word, and I'm going to go A and B. Businessman. A, publishing company. You're also a publisher.
Yeah, I've had a publishing company for about 14 years. We have 4 in the top 20 this week, so that's exciting for us.
Of course you do. That's great.
You know, it's been such an amazing thing because the way my publishing company has always worked is we really sign kids off the street. We've never signed an established writer. And so to see some of the writers that we've been, you know, they worked at the mall 1 year. And I can name one right now. He was working at the mall 4 years ago, and now he's one of the hottest, if not the hottest, young writer in town. A kid named Josh Miller, who wrote Meant to Be and 25 other cuts. And you know, just to kind of see that on the ground level for me is very inspiring. And you know, to get to work with you know, young writers who are more talented than I am by far, and to get to, you know, the thing I always hear is, man, isn't it great to get to mentor young songwriters? And the truth of the matter is they mentor me a lot more than I mentor them. And I find myself, you know, as the old guy in most rooms now, I find myself doing a lot more listening than I used to. You kind of learn to realize that you can't be 18 or 21 and they've got their finger on probably more pulse than I do. I might be able to steer it towards something, but I love learning from my writers and all young writers. And that's kind of the other thing that really keeps me energized, is realizing that I have so much more to learn. And it's usually not from people in my peer group. It's usually from literally kids that just graduated high school and college, you know, and they might not know as much about the craft of songwriting as I do because they haven't been doing it as long, but they have a whole different take on things that is what's next, you know? And if I can't learn what's next, then I might as well retire. So it's really fun for me to get to work with young writers.
And you have guided artists through your publishing company.
We've had a few come through, yeah. Kit Moore was the first guy I ever signed to my publishing company. Caitlin Smith has been just a delight to work with for a lot of years. I'm now I'm managing my first artist now, a new guy we just released music on named Drew Green, signed Sony and Bill of 40, which is Justin Timberlake's record label. And so Drew just put out his first, you know, song to the streaming 2 weeks ago, and we're off and running with him, and I could not be more excited about him. I just think he's the next big thing. So just remember the name Drew Green. Remember I said it today, because he is insane. I mean, this stuff is next freaking level. And when I say
haven't seen you that
I
excited.
mean next level. Yeah.
Wow, I can't wait. Say the name again. We need to write this down.
I told somebody yesterday, I said, 2 years from now, nobody's going to remember anything I've ever done in the music business. They're going to just think I'm Drew Green's manager. And I said, I'm totally fine with that.
Under the topic businessman, real estate.
Love real estate. I always have. I've bought some and sold some over the years. I own the Bell Tower downtown. That's probably what you're referring to.
Yep.
And, I think that it's important, first of all, to invest wisely. I mean, I've always treated every dollar I make in the music business like it's the last I'll ever make in the music business, because I think it can be, and I think that's where, everybody's known the age-old mistake in our business is to make a lot of money, spend a lot of money, and then you don't have a lot of money. And I've always been real conservative and real careful. And so try to invest in things that are going to grow and do well. And, up until COVID, downtown Nashville was a no-brainer, right?
Yeah.
And it's still going to be back and going to be.
Yeah, but I also want to say that partly so I can do a public thank you. We bought a building on Music Row, the Music Mill. I turned to you for advice on that. And especially more recently, NSAI owns the Bluebird Cafe where Tom sits. And we've got a lot of opportunities, but we've also got a lot of challenges. And you're part of a very, very small elite group that our president has appointed, a task force, if you will. And a lot of that is because of your business principles to give us advice. And your counsel is not only appreciated, it's always spot on. And thank you for that. It's very, very needed by us.
Thanks for letting me be a part of it. I mean, what an honor to get to help make decisions for the legendary Bluebird Cafe.
By the way, what's your favorite Bluebird moment?
Oh, that's a great one. Man, I've almost have too many to mention.
Well, do you remember the first time?
I do remember the first time. It was a Sunday night, one of those deals where you have to stand in line, and then they do the Sunday night, whatever that is, or Monday night. You show up, stand in line,
open mic,
audition, and then you get invited back to do 2 songs on the next time. And I did get invited back the first time I played, but I remember I was standing up there in my Garth Brooks Mo Betta shirt. I think it was pink with all kinds of funky colors, and my cowboy hat, probably singing some really bad song. And but just knowing I was there was just magical, and every time I still go back, it's such a magical place. And I've got so many, I don't know how many times I've played it now, but I have just so many fun memories of just being there with friends. It's like being in your living room with your best friends, and you wouldn't do it in your living room, but you'll do it there. And it's time to relax and have a good time. And so, man, there's nothing like the Bluebird.
Okay, most interesting man in the world. You're a pilot.
I am. I love to fly airplanes. I don't have one right now because the tornado destroyed mine. I was one of those planes that got killed at John Toon, but I'm excited to get back into that. And so every day I'm just looking and thinking and shopping about what's next. But that's been my favorite thing I've done in my adult life outside of music, because it gets my mind off everything else. The freedom to go jump in a plane and be somewhere else in a short period of time has really been one of the highlights of my life. And I'm just thankful to God I've got the opportunity.
We got a couple of great viewer questions I'm going to ask in a second, but I don't know. You, it never gets old to me. You have written with Kings of Leon, and you do this great impersonation. Would you indulge us for a second? I just love it.
Well, oh man, this is embarrassing. I haven't done this in a minute, but I'll try. I had this song. Carrie Underwood's been really good to me over my career, of course, and I had this song. It's really fun to write songs for women. It's about half the songs I've ever recorded have been sung by women. I have this little process I go through. I have this teddy that I put on, and there's a bubble bath and some Chablis, and I'm totally kidding about all that. That's a joke, but I do love writing
No,
songs.
but I think you're able to channel it because it's spot on, brother
I
man.
do love trying to get in their heads a little bit, right? And writing for me is a lot like acting. I feel like at least when you're in the moment of writing the song, I really love to put my kind of, feel what the character's feeling. It's not, and say what they would say as opposed to what you would say. And that's kind of the fun part. But the drag of writing songs for women is when you have to play them in front of groups of total strangers, especially if it's like a football team or something. You're like, man, this is not cool. One of my first hits ever, actually, that we wrote in my parents' house with Troy Burgess back in the med school days, was a song called Who I Am by Jessica Andrews. And the opening line to that chorus is, I am Rosemary's granddaughter. And that's really cool until you have to sing it for people. And you're a middle-aged guy singing, I am Rosemary's granddaughter. This song was one of those. And I wrote it with Carrie Underwood and an amazing guy named Mike Elizondo that's just everywhere and super talented. And this was Mike's first time to write in Nashville, first day to ever write in Nashville. He brought in this cool groove. We write this song. It becomes a big hit. And next thing you know, I'm supposed to play it for some function, some gig somewhere, but I have to. It's not like I can get away from it. I've got to play the song. So I'm sitting there trying to learn it. And I remember being in my kitchen, or I think it was my dining room, just thinking, man, I sound completely ridiculous on this song. I sound like I'm doing a terrible Kings of Leon impression, and I love the Kings of Leon.
I do too.
Caleb Fall is one of my favorite singers in the world. But that's what it sounded to me like. I was doing this really bad Kings of Leon impression. So anyway, I just decided to roll with that because I didn't have a way out. And it came out something like, you better take it from me. That boy is like a disease. You run your heart and you try to find your one why you can't break free. He's like a curse, he's like a dog. You get addicted to his love. And you want to get up and he's holding you down and you can't get it out just one more time. He's a good time cow, but Casanova needed no expectancy. Looks like a cool game, but he's candy coated misery. He's the devil in disguise, a snake with blue eyes, and he only comes out at night. He gives you feelings that you don't want to fight. You better run for your life. Something like that. It's terrible.
Have they heard it? Have they heard you do that?
I kind of hope not.
I hope so. Let me tell you something. No kidding. That'd be a hell of a cut for them. About time to cover that again anyway.
I don't see that happening.
So our attorney, your attorney and NSAI's attorney, Denise Stevens, shout out. Your fly buddy, she says hello.
Yeah.
So I think Amos, it's probably our friend Al Moss. What was your parents' reaction when you told them you were quitting med school to become a songwriter?
Great question. My dad was a doctor and my grandfather was a doctor, both small town docs. They were just like Marcus Welby, MD, do it all kind of doctors. But my dad was also, my mom was a classical musician. She was a classical pianist, and my dad was an amazing singer. They actually met when he was doing, just for fun, he was the lead in one of the musicals at the University of Missouri, and she was playing piano in that musical. So they were always way into music, and I think my dad always had this what if in the back of his mind because he knew he was really good, and he always had this, what if I'd have given it my shot? And so, to be honest with you, most people would think that your strong doctor dad would want to keep you in med school. It was just the opposite. He was just like, go try, go give it your shot. You can just give it all you got. And so he was nothing but encouraging. And my dad was always a fan too. He always loved what I did. My classical mother, musician, my mom, a classical musician mother, I should say, it took her a lot longer to catch on. It took me about 10 number ones to get her to admit that her son did anything with country music, because she was a bit of a, classical music snob, I guess. But then she flipped. Once she became a fan, she sort of became that kind of mom who, had to tell everybody on an airplane what her son did for a living. So she was just, she finally came around and started liking what I did.
That was our buddy Al Moss.
Hey, Al.
Little on bended
Yeah.
knee. He's one of my
Exactly.
heroes.
Dude.
So I think I'm pronouncing this. Rehana Estrada asks, when you are signing a new songwriter, what do you look for to give them that chance?
That's a really good question. It varies. I mean, I will say it varies, but we always look for, you know, first of all, we need to hear great songs. You know, I mean, you can't sign a songwriter unless they're playing you some great songs, you know, unless they're doing something right. And then the next, you know, my publishing company has always been pretty small. We've never had more than 10 writers. I think we have 6 or 7 now. We're very much a family. And we're not, it's not weird like that, but we need you to fit, you know, we need you to be a family member and to be somebody that we want to love and be around every day. And that's something that, you know, in the crew that I have now, I can say now more than ever, I think we are very much a family. Work ethic is everything in songwriting. I mean, it's everything in any business or in any job, but you know, songwriters cannot do anything for a year if we don't want to. So it's also 100% self-motivated job. There's no boss ever telling you, you got to work today, you know? And so if you're not self-motivated and you don't have a work ethic that is strong, it's going to be tough to make it. I will say it's been interesting to see this right now. Two of my songwriters are both the sons of farmers, right? Including Drew Green, the artist I was telling you about. He's the son of a tree farmer. And I have never seen anyone work as hard as these two guys because they know what their options are, you know, and it's impressive. I mean, you know, it's just been impressive to watch the level of work ethic that some of the kids I get to be around have.
Well, I just have to say, because not every star is in Nashville. One of my favorite in the world is based in Kansas. He asked a question today. Great songwriter artist named Drew Six. But he leads into what I wanted to ask you about anyway. He thanks you for your inspiration. Brett, what inspired you to recently shift back to pursue an artist thing? And I was a little surprised by that. You are arguably one of the best songwriter artists that's ever been in this town. But it's been a long time since you made a record, but you've got a new one out.
I do, you know, it was inspired by my 50th birthday, you know, to be honest with you. I turned 50, and I think literally on that day, I think it's just one of those, everybody's got those moments where you have to kind of take a deep breath and evaluate what you've been doing and see if you want to change anything. And for me, I had a bit, I don't know if you call it an epiphany or whatever, but that particular day, something in the universe was telling me, look, no matter what I do, the rest of my career, I want at least part of that to be me making music just for me that I love. And because we've been talking about the songwriting business a lot, it's fantastic. It's the greatest job in the world, but it doesn't necessarily serve your artistry like it should, because you're not writing for you. You're trying to write what someone else would say, what someone else would sing, the way they should sing it. That's been my job for forever, you know. And even back when I had record deals before, obviously I was trying to be a country star, you know. And that, for me, the reason it didn't work is I was kind of trying to put a square piece into a round hole, you know, and it's just not going to work for me. And so what I really committed myself to trying to do was just make music that I love, not to put a genre on it at all, not to put any parameters around it, not to try to write hits for radio. This is what this is about. This is about sort of feeding my soul and feeding my musical integrity, if you will, and giving me the chance to use my voice, because, you know, I do play a lot of shows where I'm singing other people's songs, but it's not my natural voice. It's not how I sing, because I'm always kind of affecting it to be what that song led to in the first place. And so, you know, I cleared my schedule for the next 2 weeks, and I sat down and wrote at least 10 or 11 in those 2 weeks just by myself on my couch with 0 parameters around it, and had more fun writing songs, I think, than I've ever had in my life. It was like Christmas every day. I'd wake up and just like, what do I want to do? What what, you know, and for me that, you know, I've learned pretty quickly that it's, you know, what I call my music, I call it Nashville soul. I mean, I'm pretty much just naturally a soul singer. I grew up singing in church. And so my stuff has a lot of Memphis influence, has a lot of gospel influence, and a lot of country influence, because I can't help that part of me either. But, you know, it's been very, it's, you know, whether or not, you know, and it's doing, some of it's doing great. Some of it's streaming really well. It's out there. I'm really proud of what it's doing. But even if it doesn't, I'll keep doing it. Just because of, you know, if I don't do that, I risk losing some of my love for music, and I don't want to do that.
Well, I was going to indulge us and ask you to play one of your big hits, but in a minute, we're about to finish. I'm going to ask you to play two songs. I'm going to ask you to play one of your new ones, and then your classic Jesus Take the Wheel, because I think we need to hear some of the new music.
Of course.
So we got a lot of questions. I'm just going to have time to take one more, and it segues into something I wanted to acknowledge anyway. What do your kids think about your music? Are you a cool dad? Seriously, people, for real? Look at this guy. And by the way, Tom, 50? I hate you, Brett. Look at you, man.
52 now. I just turned 52 last week.
I want some of whatever it is, pal. I need some of it.
You know, I don't know what my kids think. You know, I have four amazing kids who are all, you know, getting to be grown ups really fast. One graduated college this year. I got two more in college, and one's a junior in high school. I think they've loved growing up with musicians around. I think they've loved growing up with a studio in the house. One of them's a studio level drummer. One of them's a studio level guitarist. You know, I think none of them write, you know, and none of them sing really, which is, you know, and I don't know why, but they do love music and they love being around it. And, you know, you'd have to ask them. I think they probably think I'm a big dorky dad. I think that's what, you know, all kids think of their dad. I'm just a big dorky dad, probably. You know?
Well, you just got engaged. Congratulations.
I did just get engaged to an amazing, amazing woman. Yeah, Melody Carroll. Can you believe I'm actually engaged to a woman whose name is Song? Melody Carroll.
Just hit me. I'm like, are you serious? That's
a real God-given name. Her dad was the CFO of Stax Records in Memphis. And
really?
Her mom was a country singer, and she's just an amazing, amazing lady. I'm super excited.
You want to take a music tour, make a day of it, see all the Elvis stuff, go to Sun Records, but go to Stax in Memphis. What a walk through a very important era of our history. Look, I want to end on this before we hear some songs, Brett. A couple things. First is advocacy work. That's why NSAI was founded. For most of the time that we have accomplished the Songwriters Capital Gains Act, we changed the tax code because there was a crazy inequity for years and years about how song catalogs were taxed. We changed it. People said it couldn't be done. We won a huge trial, Copyright Royalty Board trial that Tom referenced at the start, and we passed arguably the most important piece of songwriter legislation ever, the Music Modernization Act. It doesn't change the rate songwriters get paid, but it changes the way they get set. And it gives us leaps and bounds, more control over our copyrights, more transparency. Not only were you the legislative co-chair of NSAI, and look, I'm not a songwriter. I think if I pat myself on the back, it would be, I don't think any non-songwriter has the sensibility more than I do. But there were times, Brett, and sometimes 2 or 3 times in a day, I've got to check with 2 or 3 cats to go, it's a huge decision. Is this the right thing? And you were one of them. And your advice was always spot on. You had a way to combine your intellect with practicality with me. And that you also knew, Brett, I don't know if you know this, when to go, yeah, that's the right decision, and when to nudge me, not that I need nudging, to get ready for a fight. And not only did you do it for us, you did it for the Recording Academy. So thank you. For every American songwriter, thank you for that.
Oh, of course. I've been honored to work with you for, I don't know how many years now, but I hope it's a whole bunch more.
Well, I do too. And there's a couple moments we won't talk about that you pulled me out of the fire.
That's true. But you guys, Tom said at the start, there's never been a better friend to songwriters than Bart Herbison. And that's the real honest to goodness truth.
Thank you.
We're grateful, my friend.
It's been a privilege. And thank you, Tom. Tom, I'm going to encourage you because you told me the other day that sometimes you turn the tables and you ask the person who's being interviewed to do the interview, there's nobody better than Brad. I saw him interview Nick Jonas, which I would argue that Nick would tell you is probably his favorite interview he ever did, because you got it. You spoke music with him. You understood that. Do you remember that one?
I do. That was for the Recording Academy, I think. That was fun. It was really fun.
Fantastic, man.
Yeah.
And we're like, it was so cool. So would you play one of your new ones, and then would you take us home with Jesus Take the Wheel? Ladies and gentlemen,
Absolutely.
the smartest man in the room. Give it up. Give it up here virtually for Brad James.
I'm also the dumbest man in the room I'm sitting in, so maybe that's the next title. I'll do this song. This is my current single off my project that's out, and I think it kind of speaks to where we are a little bit in the world, maybe. It's called Tell the People. I went over to the River Jordan, stepped in the water, fell down on my knee. I saw the sweetest face in my reflection, heard her whisper softly to me, tell the people you love that you love them. Don't let anything get in your way, so they know there ain't no one above them. Tell the people each and every day. Now life is long and living ain't easy. It's a grind, it's a winding road. You can try to walk along, but believe me, it's your help having someone carry the load. Yeah. Tell the people you love that you love them. Don't let anything get in your way, so they know there ain't no one above them. Tell the people each and every day. Say what you need to say. Go on. Say what you need to say. Tell the people you love that you love them. Don't let anything get in your way. Let them know there ain't no one above them. Tell the people each and every day. Yeah. Tell the people you love that you love them. Don't let anything get in your way, so they know there ain't no one above them. Tell the people each and every day, so they know there ain't no one above them. Tell the people each and every day. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm gonna close with this one. This is Jesus Take the Wheel. We already told you the story, so. She was driving last Friday on her way to Cincinnati on a snow-white Christmas Eve. Going home to see her mama and her daddy with her baby in the backseat. 50 miles to go when she was running low, faith and gasoline. It'd been a long, hard year. She had a lot on her mind, and she wouldn't pay attention. She was going way too fast. Before she knew what she was spinning on a thin black sheet of glass, she saw both their lives flash before her eyes. Didn't even have time to cry. She was so scared. She threw her hands up in the air. Jesus, take the wheel, take it from my head, 'cause I can't do this on my own. I'm letting go, so give me one more chance. Save me from this road I'm on. Jesus, take the wheel. It was still turning colder when she made it to the shoulder, and that car came to a stop. She cried when she saw that baby in the backseat sleeping like a rock. And for the first time in a long time, she bowed her head to pray. She said, I'm sorry for the way that I've been living my life. I know I've got to change. So from now on tonight, Jesus, take the wheel. Take it from my hands, 'cause I can't do this on my own. I'm letting go. Give me one more chance. Save me from this road I'm on. From this road I'm on. Jesus, take the wheel. Oh, I'm letting go. Give me one more chance. Save me from this road I'm on. From this road I'm on. Jesus, take the wheel. Oh, take the wheel. Thank you guys. Thank you guys so much. Thanks for joining us today. What fun.
Thank you, man.
Bravo. Hey, Bart and Brett, you guys absolutely over-delivered. That was amazing. I am so thankful to have you on this program and so grateful that you do what you do to make the music industry better and healthier for songwriters. So please keep doing what you're doing. Ladies and gentlemen out there, this concludes today's program. We will be back next Wednesday. That's July 1st, next Wednesday at the same time. And I've got two more really smart people who will occupy the smartest people in the room. It's Mr. Ted Cohen and Karen Allen. Completely different subject matter next week. But again, thank you to Bart and Brett for absolutely crushing it today. We appreciate you. Everyone out there, stay safe and healthy and come back to the Bluebird very soon. That's it.